Live now. Happy Friday, everybody. Good afternoon. My name is Nate. I am the marketing and community lead for Laterpress. And today we are going to be on our third episode of our new streaming series, taking a look at our AI writing tools and interacting with them in a slower, much more methodical way than I would if I was trying to shoot a quick tutorial video where I'd just be flying through what all the buttons do, how different things work, to give basic information on how they work. This series is more on really digging into the mindset of trying to use things well, evaluating what looks good, what looks bad, how to approach edits and changes, and really thinking through how to use the tools to tell this kind of story that you would want to tell. So we are continuing to work on a romantic fantasy, urban fantasy rom-com. The concept is that a couple gets together, the first date is really awful, and a dating app traps them in a magical time loop that they cannot escape until they realize that they really are made for each other. They just have to work through some of their baggage. So we started working on this in the initial stream, an introduction to Laterpress AI, and continued working more deeply on plotting in last week's episode. I have not gone through and meticulously updated every plot in the outline here with the level of detail I would like it, or rewritten it to the way I would like it. You'll note I still have some editorial notes in here for myself as a reminder of what I wanted to change. Um, at this early stage in the novel, I don't think that's going to be a problem. I would recommend making sure the outline is how you like it before you get too deep into the book, because the tools will look at that as context. And if your outline is flawed or takes things in a direction that you don't want it to go and you do not correct that, the scenes can start taking things in directions that you don't want. So there will be need to be follow up on the later portions of this outline later on. But for just the very opening setup of the story, I don't think that's going to be needed. So today we're going to work on the first two beats: ordinary life, the comedic setup for the rom-com, and kind of the emotional wound, giving you an early look into kind of what's wrong with the characters and the baggage that they have to walk through to have their happily ever after. So when you have an outline ready to go, there's two ways to proceed here. The first is if you click the Generate Scenes button, this will generate multiple scenes under the beat for that story point. And you'll note here we're seeing enter seed phrase or instructions. This can be left blank. You are not obligated to fill out anything here. If we just click generate, we would get scene cards. Here is advanced settings. So this can let you change which model you use to generate the scenes. And the temperature is how much it's going to deviate from the exact wording of the prompt. The lower the temperature, the more prescriptive outputs can be, meaning you'll get very similar results every time. The higher the temperature is tuned, the more variance will be in the output. But the downside to that too is that it may not follow instructions as well. So, that's why there's the slider there. You kind of have to play hot and cold with it, risk reward. I tend to prefer lower temperatures to stick closer to what I am telling the AI I want to do. And max output is the maximum token length of how much it's going to write for a scene card. This should be way more than sufficient. I like Opus for writing. It is more expensive, but I think it does a better job. So our first story beat here, we open with two parallel mornings in Horizon, which is the city. Tessa is in her cozy plant-filled office mid-session with an anxious Phoenix familiar who keeps stress-molting embers onto her couch. After the meeting, she checks the Cupid app only to see the words match pending. Your patience is appreciated. Across town, Eddie is in a cramped apartment, sitting across from the translucent ghost of an elderly woman who refuses to move on until someone finds the letters she wrote and never sent and delivers them to her surviving husband so he can know how she felt about him. Eddie takes his clients seriously and gives them his undivided attention. That is something I put in there because for some reason the AI's default response was to have Eddie being very distracted or bumbling or looking at his phone, which I thought was very unprofessional behavior and not how I would want his character to be. So I put this in here because I wanted to better explain his character and to try to keep the AI from going, oh, quirky rom-com men have to be idiots or unprofessional, or I didn't want that. So we fixed that. Later, he meets with one of his friends. The friend convinces him he needs to sign up for the Cupid app. Eddie balks at the cost, $5,000, and the intensive screening requirements, but the friend convinces him worth it. I think that's enough description that I don't need to put in additional instructions. I'm just going to let it generate and see what it comes up with here. And now when scene cards have generated, I recommend reading every card that it generates before doing anything else with any of them, because sometimes I love all of the scenes that it comes up with, but not necessarily in the order it presented them, which means I may want to swap them around and move them around. Sometimes it comes up with a couple scene cards that seem pretty redundant, so I will delete one of them and only work off the other one, or they're close enough that I'll kind of combine a little bit of the language from one with a little bit of the language from the other to have a beat that is the best of both worlds and go from there. So first of all, it gave me Eddie, and Tessa. So it generated 3 cards. We needed at least 1 for each of them. I think I know why it gave 2 for Eddie. So let's see what it says here. So the description for this scene: Tessa is mid-session in her cozy plant-filled office in Horizon, seated across from, I'm going to zoom in a little bit so this is text is even bigger on screen for the sake of YouTube watchers. Seated across from a young Phoenix familiar named Salil, who is in the grip of a full-blown anxiety spiral. This distress manifests physically. Tiny embers shed from her plumage with every nervous twitch, singeing the arm of Tessa's therapy couch and leaving faint scorch marks. Tessa remains calm and warm, guiding the Phoenix through grounding exercise while discreetly nudging a fireproof tray closer with her foot. The session reveals the core of Soleil's issue. Her bonded human recently started a new relationship, and Soleil feels displaced, unsure whether her role as an emotional anchor still matters. Tessa validates the familiar's fear with genuine empathy, reframing the situation as an extension of the bond rather than a replacement, and we see how naturally skilled she is at work. Artemis watches from the windowsill with half-lidded eyes, occasionally flicking her tail when Tessa lands, a particularly good insight, serving as a silent quality control presence. After Soleil leaves, trailing a faint smell of wood smoke and looking noticeably lighter, Tessa brushes ember residue off her sleeve, checks her phone, and opens the Cupid app. I actually like that talking about a relationship is kind of a through line to why Tessa would think to check her own after this session, so I think that ties together well. The screen displays a single message in Cupid's signature, sleek, slightly smug font. Match pending, your patience is appreciated. Tessa stares at it, taps the screen twice, gets nothing. Phone sets the phone down with a mixture of curiosity and the faintest edge of dread. Artemis, without opening her eyes, says from the windowsill, your heart rate just changed. I can hear it from here. Tess ignores her and straightens the scorch cushion. Okay. That all sounds fine as a summary for what happens in this scene, so I don't think I need to micromanage this one. I would just dig into the generated text. Now, chapter 2, we have Eddie. Eddie sits in a cramped apartment. Across from him at a cluttered table sits the translucent, faintly luminous ghost of Miss Adeline Chow. She died 3 weeks ago and has refused every attempt to help her move on. She's sharp, dignified, stubbornly specific about her unfinished business. This looks like something I would change a little bit. Decades ago, she wrote a series of deeply personal love letters to her husband, Gerald, letters she never sent because she could never find the right moment. Now she needs someone to find them in her old apartment and deliver them to Gerald so he knows how she truly felt. And I think partially this is my fault because I did explain that I did set that up as the premise. They're married and he should have some idea how she felt. Um, I'm not sure if I would want to edit it here or let the AI generate something and then kind of dig in and rewrite um, how that beat gets approached myself. Eddie listens with unhurried attention, taking handwritten notes, asking careful follow up questions. All right, so this is just kind of describing the scene that I'd outlined about him with his clients. One thing I am thinking of as I read this is that, and again, this is kind of my fault for approving things thus far, is this chapter necessary? Because we're starting with chapter one and we're starting with back to back chapters of the two characters basically both acting like therapists. And some of what this chapter is looking to accomplish, I could probably handle within Eddie's dialogue during dates. So, this exists here, and technically speaking, the scene card is correct based on what I have established for what happens in the beat here. But I think I want to delete it and just start with chapter 3 here. And this is the nice thing about using AI with brainstorming or iterating on things, is that when you hit on an idea you like or you don't like, you can go, you know what, I don't like that, and get rid of things you don't like before committing, minutes, hours, days to writing a scene that you realize, you know what, I don't like that, I'm going to cut it. So I think I am actually going to uh, delete that whole chapter here and delete this later that evening. And we're just going to start with Eddie with his friend about how he needs to sign up for Cupid, because we can get some insights into his character here while he's interacting with Eddie that could have happened in that last chapter. But instead, we get them here with his friend and we get a little bit more plot momentum moving forward. So I think that's the better way to go here. Eddie meets his friend Dev. Oh, I need to re-zoom in. Horizon's downtown entertainment district. Dev is already 2 drinks in and radiating the evangelical energy of a recent convert he matched on Cupid 6 months ago, is now deliriously happy with his partner and made it his personal mission to get Eddie on the app. Eddie is skeptical from the jump. When Dev mentions the $5,000 sign-up fee, Eddie nearly chokes on his drink, pointing out he could fund 3 months of spirit transition casework for that price. I would maybe pick a different detail. Dev counters that Eddie spent all of his time helping dead people find closure and 0 time finding his own, which lands harder than Eddie wants to admit. Eddie pushes back on the app's intensive screening process. He says love isn't the idea of a corporate algorithm deciding who he should be with. Dev, grinning, says that's exactly what someone who's afraid of being known would say. His work proves every single day that people's biggest regret is waiting too long to go after what matters, so why is he the exception? Eddie stares at his drink, thinks about Adeline and her unsent letters, and finally says he'll look into it. Now, this is a reference to a scene I have since deleted, so it would be interesting to see how it writes it. I would still leave this in here because we don't necessarily want the event to have not happened. I just don't think it's necessary for word length and pacing to show that particular scene. So I would pay attention to here to what the AI says about that interaction. as kind of a high probability area that I would need to look at for edits and see how specific or vague it is, but I would want that to remain in there. Okay, the one thing I want to change in here for sure is we mentioned the sign-up fee, pointing out that he could fund 3 months of spirit transition casework on for that price. That detail doesn't work for me. I'm going to keep it vague and leave this open to serendipity. Eddie nearly chokes on his drink, listing several things he could do with that $5,000 instead. Now, because I am not being specific and I am simply saying listing several other things he could do, I have no idea what it's going to give me. I could love its suggestions. I could hate them. If I really cared or I really needed it to be a specific thing, I would want to spell that out here. But sometimes the vagueness is part of the fun to see what it gives you and then decide, do I want to keep that? Do I want to change that? So let's save here. So now we've got our first 2 chapters. I'm going to start with this before going any deeper. But there is one thing I want to check here. The wiki. Yeah, that's all there. Okay, so I wanted to point out something here that is a little bit hidden, but a very important feature for people. I think if you want to customize how the text generates a little bit and not have text that reads as bog standard ChatGPT text or bog standard Claude generated text, which is that in the settings here, of the wiki, click wiki, go into settings, and under prose style, we have a few default styles that feed into the text generation prompts, or you can specify a custom. And so what I did outside of our tools, this is something that as we make improvements on our assistant, I think people will be able to do within our tools. But for right now, I did this with Claude. I gave it several chapters of my own writing to analyze and then come up with a style guide based on what it read of my work. And so I copied a lot of the highlights of that into here as my style guide and saved it so that it tries to emulate that style and pay attention to those details while writing things. So that, it may not perfectly replicate my voice, but it's going to land more in the ballpark of where I would want it to be, which can help save me a little bit of editing and changing and deleting things around. So that is where you can put your details here. Now, this is additional context that the AI is going to be paying attention to on every prompt, which means that setting your own custom writing style is going to make prompts a little bit more expensive. This is not a huge amount of context, so it's not like you're going to double the token cost by any stretch. I don't think the difference is huge, but there is a difference. So wanted to note that. So I just wanted to verify that I did have the style guide in place here before we generate anything. And so now clicking the generate scene button text will generate a written draft of a chapter based on everything that is in this scene card here. There is another way to do this if you don't want to use the default generate scene text prompt, which would be to press the space bar and scroll through all of the different scene text options available. We only have a few available by default. This is the scene text one. And a couple of these exist only on my account and aren't released to the public. If you wanted to create your own prompt, you can go into create and edit story tools. And drafting tools would show up when you hit the spacebar on a blank bar text like what I just showed. Editing tools only show up when a selection of text has been highlighted. And plot, you would not get access to. That is for Laterpress staff only. But in outline here, you could also create your own. That's where you go to create your own plot outlines. I can't talk. So this is a more advanced feature if you really want to dig in and customize things. That's beyond the scope of what I'm going to talk about today. I'm not sure if I'm going to do a stream about prompting. That might work better as a dedicated tutorial video on how to make your own prompts. But I wanted to pause a moment to point out that that is where that feature lives. So let's go chapter 1 here, and you click generate scene text, and now it will start generating the text, and it will take a second to generate through here. I'm not going to try to read it as it goes. We're just going to let it do its thing. And I'm going to do, once this is done, I'm going to do the same thing for chapter 2 because it's a different point of view. So I don't think that we need to be super careful with getting all of the details right on this chapter before moving on to the next one. Though generally I do recommend kind of working sequentially, making sure that you like one chapter before moving on to the next, because the text writing does look at prior chapters for context. So if you have a continuity error in one chapter and start generating in the next chapter without pruning that continuity error out, you now might have continuity errors in 2 chapters. So it's good to make sure that you've got details locked in. So this will be another stream showing that when interacting with AI tools, using them for assistance writing a story, my experience in working with AI tools has been that the vast majority of the time you're spending is not actually working with the AI tools. It's on the front end, explaining your universe, your characters, your plot line. It's providing it context. And then you'll have a little bit of time running the AI prompts to generate things. And then at the end, a lot of time reviewing what it did, editing the results, sprucing things up to your level of satisfaction. So we're going to let it generate the second chapter here. And then once this is done, we're going to go back to chapter 1. I'm going to start reading through that. And as I go, kind of offering my thought process about the results and what happened. And I think at this stage, early on for chapter 1 and for chapter 2, I'm going to highlight areas of where I would change things, but probably read through and mark up the first 2 chapters before worrying about digging into the weeds and rewriting anything. So we just need to give this a little bit more time to finish its work. I need to get some like elevator loading music or something for the moments where we're doing this. Okay, so now it's getting to, he's thinking about the client. Okay, it looks, I couldn't read as fast as it's moving along, but that looked like a reasonable, it looked like it was summarizing what had happened, which is fine because that just further proves that the initial scene of him in his office wasn't necessary, and that we don't need 2 chapters back to back of our characters in their professional capacity. So now let's go back to chapter 1, and it likes to put in the chapter number sometimes right away. I just delete that right away. Sometimes there are gaps in the text for some reason. I would go through and delete those where we're still on one scene. Okay, and so now we've got a chapter. And now, again, yeah, 200. Okay, make this nice and larger so the text is. I feel like I'm in old man large print mode, but for folks watching this on YouTube, I want to make sure that the text is as easy for you to see from your video watching experience as it possibly could be. So we'll read this together here. The ember landed on the arm of the therapy couch and glowed there for a full second before Tessa nudged the fireproof tray forward with the tip of her boot, sliding into the position beneath Soleil's perch with the practiced ease of someone who'd done this many times before. Practiced ease has kind of become a bit of an AI writing cliche. So what I do when I am reading through what happened is I will highlight things and make the text bold as an easy reminder for myself that that is a detail I wanted to change and edit. Actually, I'm going to take that whole phrase right there as something to keep an eye on. I want you to try something for me, Tessa said, keeping her voice low and even. Can you name 3 things you can feel right now? Not emotions, physical sensations. Soleil's plumage rippled, sending a cascade of tiny sparks down her breast feathers. She was small for a phoenix, barely larger than a cockatiel, and young enough that her fire hadn't settled into the deep golds and crimsons of maturity. Right now she was all anxious oranges and flickering yellows, her talons gripping the edge of the couch cushion hard enough to leave pinprick scorch marks upon the upholstery. And now, okay, on the arm of the therapy couch, I'm trying to make sure there wasn't a contradiction here. On the therapy couch, gripping the edge. Okay, nope, that checks out. I might maybe change a description in here, but that wasn't a detail contradiction like I first thought. So her talons grip the edge of the couch hard enough to leave pinprick scorch marks upon the upholstery. The cushion, Soleil said. Her voice was thin, high and thin, a sound like a match being struck under my feet, and the air from the vent. It's cold on my left wing. Good, that's 2, 1 more. The cushion, 1, the air from the vent. Okay, yep, that is 2. So his head twitched, bird-like and wrapped. Yeah, it's a phoenix. Of course, it's bird-like, so that feels kind of dumb. My chest, it's tight. It's like someone's sitting on it. Okay, that's your body telling me something. Can you stay with that feeling for a second? You don't have to fix it, just notice it. Another ember dropped. It hit the tray this time, hissing softly against the treated metal. On the windowsill behind Tessa's desk, Artemis cracked one eye open, tracked the ember's descent, and closed it again. Soleil's wings tucked tighter against her body. It's been like this for weeks, ever since Marin started seeing him. There it was. Tessa didn't lean forward, didn't change her expression. She learned early in her practice that familiars could read shifts in body language with an almost supernatural precision, which made sense given that reading their bonded human's emotional state was literally what they'd been made for. This is basically correct, but I'm being super nitpicky that I kind of want to change how that's phrased, even if I think the point stands. Any sudden movement, any flicker of clinical interest, and Celia would clam up or worse, start performing distress instead of actually feeling it. That's another phrase I'm going to think about. Tell me about that, Tessa said. She met someone, a guy from her climbing gym. Soleil's talons flexed, giving fresh marks in the cushion. Kai, he's fine. He's perfectly fine. He brings her coffee and remembers which oat milk she likes, and he has this stupid nice laugh and a burst of embers bright enough to make Tessa blink. The tray caught most of them. One landed on Tessa's sleeve. She brushed it off without looking down. So one thing I would want to start keeping track of now is how many times are we another ember I would just go through and start counting how many times are embers coming out from this phoenix, because it starts to get repetitive, and I'd be like, okay, can the phoenix have other gestures? We don't want to be one note about what is happening here. So it's getting to the level where I'm starting to notice that. So I would highlight that detail. The tray caught most of them. One landed on Tessa's sleeve, and she brushed it off without looking down. Okay. And so the phoenix is going, and she doesn't need me anymore. The words came out small, stripped of frantic energy that had been driving the session so far. That sat in like the room like something fragile and newly exposed. Again, that is kind of AI standard purple prose to me. That is not how I would personally phrase a thought like this. So we're going to highlight that as, that's an area that I would change things. Tessa let the silence hold for a beat, 2 beats, long enough for Sleal to hear what she'd actually said. She doesn't need you anymore, Tessa repeated. Not a question, a mirror. This is another thing AI sometimes does. I've had enough uh, looks at these, is somebody says something, somebody repeats the same thing back. Yes, that does happen. I have done that sometimes myself in my own books, but I know when I'm doing it, and I'm usually doing it for a very specific comedic point. Um, Here, I would cut that, I think. Soleil's plumage dimmed. The anxious flickering settled into something lower, a banked coal glow that was somehow harder to look at than the sparks. Borderline, I'm gonna leave it. I'm her emotional anchor. That's what I am. That's my whole purpose. And now she has someone else who makes her feel safe and seen. And her voice cracked, a sound like green wood splitting in a fire. What am I for if she doesn't need that from me? On the windowsill, Artemis's tail flickered once, a slow, deliberate movement like a metronome marking time. At no point so far have we mentioned that Artemis is a cat, so that is a detail I would probably want to work into one of the first couple mentions of the cat. Tessa chose her next words carefully. I mean, the tail flickered once. People might be able to imply that it's a cat, but I think I might actually add a little description into that. Tessa chose her next words carefully, not because she didn't know what to say. She knew exactly what to say, had sat with this particular fear in dozens of sessions with dozens of familiars, but because Salil needed to feel found, not fixed. And that feels a little too warm and fuzzy, wholesome, gag me. AIism. I don't like it. I would not how I would phrase the same sentiment. I'm just going to highlight that whole paragraph actually, because even if I want to say that exact point, I would not phrase things that way. Can I push back on something? Salil's head bobbed, a tiny nod. You said Marin doesn't need you anymore. But what I'm hearing is that Marin's needs are expanding. She's adding a new source of connection to her life. That's not the same thing as replacing an existing one. It feels the same. I know it does. And that feeling is real and it matters, but I want you to sit with a question for a second. Tessa paused, making sure Salil was with her. The phoenix's dark eyes were fixed on her, unblinking. What has Marin actually pulled away from you? Or are you pulling away from her because you're afraid she's about to? Salil opened her beak, closed it, opened it again. I stopped sleeping on her pillow, she said quietly. Last week I moved to the dresser. Why? Because if she's going to choose him, I don't want to be. Salil stopped, her feathers flattened. Oh, yeah, Tessa said gently. I'm doing it to myself. You're protecting yourself from a loss that hasn't happened, which makes complete sense given your entire identity is built around being needed. The idea that you might change shape feels like an existential. You might need change. Okay, that feels awkward to me as I'm trying to read it, so I'm going to revisit that. Tessa leaned back in her chair, keeping her posture open. But here's the thing about bonds, Salil. They're not a fixed resource. Marin loving Kai doesn't use up the love she has for you. It's not a tank that drains. It's more like she searched for the right image, something a phoenix would understand. Fire, Tessa said. You can light 100 candles from a single flame and the original doesn't get smaller. Salil stared at her. That actually, I like that metaphor. That would stay. That would definitely stay. Salil stared at her. The glow in her plumage shifted. Still dim, still uncertain, but warmer now. Less like banked coals and more like the first light of something catching. I think I can punch that up. Artemis's tail flickered again, twice this time. Yeah, I'm just going to go ahead and delete that now because we don't need a running score of Artemis tail flickers. What if I go back to the pillow, Salil said slowly, and she tells me she'd rather I didn't. Then you'd have real information instead of the story you're telling yourself, and we'd work with that. But right now, you're grieving something that hasn't actually been taken from you. You moved to the dresser. Marin didn't move you there. Salil was quiet for a long moment. The embers had stopped falling entirely. Her plumage had settled into a steady, warm amber, not the bright confidence of a phoenix in full health, but calmer than anything Tessa had seen from her in the past 3 sessions. I'm going to go home tonight, Salil said, and I'm going to sleep on the pillow. How does that make you feel about? Okay, again, that's another one that sentence is technically correct, but if I'm stuttering reading it, then maybe I can make it smoother. Terrifying, a pause, but less terrifying than the dresser. Just a smell. That's usually how it works. This whole bit could probably be a little bit streamlined, but I'm not going to flag it at the moment because I don't think at the moment that I need to be that nitty gritty. So they spent the remaining minutes on practical grounding techniques, breathing exercises adapted for avian respiratory systems, a sensory checklist that Salil could run through when anxiety spiked. Tessa walked her through each one patiently, checking for understanding, adjusting the language when something didn't land. By the time the session's end approached, Salil's feathers had smoothed into something almost sleek, and the torch marks on the couch had stopped multiplying. This is what AI loves to do, the neat and tidy wrap up to a point. It likes to put a bow on things. So when I see it, I mark it because we do need to have a transition from the therapy session into the post-therapy session and Tessa doing other things. But I think there's a more efficient way to do that, or a more interesting way to do that than this particular way of kind of a summary of stuff. So that is a passage that I would flag as something I want to revisit. Salil hopped to the edge of the tray, then to the arm of the couch, then fluttered to the floor near the door. Now, this description doesn't hold up for me based on where I thought the tray was, so I would check that. She turned back, and for a moment she looked impossibly young, a creature built from fire and myth, standing on the hardwood floor of a therapist's office in a mid-rise building in Horizon, trying to figure out how to be brave enough to sleep on a pile. Okay, this again is AI really trying hard to put a neat and tidy bow on everything. So my editor red pen is going to come out and say, let's slow roll and chop that down. Thank you, Tessa. Same time next week. And Salil, the Phoenix paused at the door. You're not being replaced. You're being joined. There's a difference. Again, we're trying to hammer things home a little too hard. Now, I love writing dialogue. My favorite dialogue is my favorite thing to write. My favorite part of the writing process. So yeah, it's always going to have an uphill battle writing any dialogue that I want to keep and not replace. I just know that's my own stylistic thing. But we have a little bit of multiple instances of wrapping things up with a bow here. Soleil's plumage flared once, a brief, bright pulse of gold, and then she was gone, the door clicking shut behind her. The faint smell of wood smoke lingered in the air, warm and not unpleasant, like a campfire remembered from a distance. I do not write this many metaphors. Tessa sat for a moment in the quiet. The office settled around her. The trailing pot hose, oh, I don't even know what that word is, so flag it. On the bookshelf, the fiddle leaf fig in the corner that she'd been nursing back from a spider mite infestation for 3 months. The row of succulents on the windowsill that Artemis pretended to ignore but occasionally batted off the edge when she felt underappreciated. Late afternoon light slanted through the window, catching dust motes and the faintest shimmer of residual phoenix energy still dissipating in the air. She brushed ember residue off her sleeve. I forgot if embers ever landed on her sleeve. I think it probably did, but I'm going to highlight that as a potential detail I would need to scroll back up and continuity check. A fine glittering powder like rust-colored glitter. It got into everything. She'd found it in her hair last Tuesday, in her coffee mug on Thursday, and once memorably in her bra after a session with a fire salamander who had had a full meltdown about his human's decision to move to a colder climate. I don't hate it, but I can probably take that idea and improve on it. So sometimes I flag things not but because they're bad, but because I think there's a solid germ of an idea in there, and I can dial it up to an even higher level. The couch cushion had a new scorch mark. She pressed her thumb against it, still warm, and made a mental note to order another slipcover. The fireproof ones from that specialty shop in the Warding District, third one this quarter. Maybe I don't need that as another detail, but it's not an obvious, I'm going to delete it. Her phone sat on the side table where she left it, screen down, the way she always kept it during sessions. She picked it up, swiped past 2 texts from her mother, one a photo of sunset and one asking if she was eating enough protein. I can tell you right now, I don't want that. So swipe past 2 texts from her mother. I will bold this, though, because that is an opportunity for me to insert something tying to her mom that I think is funnier. So she picked it up, swiped past 2 texts from mother, a reminder about her license renewal, and a notification from her building's management about her scheduled ward maintenance on the 7th floor. This is another thing I have noticed in generating text with AI is that it is a big believer in the rule of 3, which I am as well, but I also make a point to not always do things in 3, because here we've got 3 things. We've got text from mom, that's 1, reminder about her license renewal, that's 2, and a notification from her building's management, that's 3. So sometimes when it is doing descriptions, it likes to practically always give 3 things. And there are times where I like to do that, and I think it makes sense for like character building, because 3 is enough. 3 is kind of the magic number to give readers a fair amount of context or describe something or set up character, but not so much that you're like, okay, I'm bored, like get to the point already, move along. So I'm not anti-rule of 3 or having descriptions with 3 things, but it is worth noting that AI does it a lot and it is not always necessary. And this is one of those situations where I would just get rid of like the license renewal, because maybe somebody reads that as a plot thread that I'm going to carry on later, and I'm going to tell you right now I am not. So we can just say 2 texts from her mother and a notification from her building's management about a scheduled ward maintenance on the 7th floor. Scheduled ward maintenance reads like generic fantasy nonsense that should mean something. I'm going to highlight that as, maybe that's a detail I leave alone and let stand. Is there an opportunity there for me to come up with something kookier and more interesting? Now, then she opened Cupid. The app loaded with its characteristic smoothness, no lag, no buffering, just an instant transition to the interface that probably cost more in enchantment engineering than Tessa's entire office lease. It does this too, comparing costs to things. And it kind of gives me the ick, but it's not an automatic delete when I see it. The color scheme was warm gold and deep. Oh, sorry, I'm getting like the hiccups or something here. The color scheme was warm gold and deep rose, tasteful in a way that felt almost aggressive, like a luxury hotel lobby that had been designed to make you feel simultaneously welcomed and judged. We can do better. A single message sat centered on the screen, rendered in Cupid's signature font, clean, modern, and radiating the quiet confidence of something that had never once doubted itself. There's another one where I think I can do better. Match pending, your patience is appreciated. Tessa stared at it. She tapped the screen. Nothing happened. She tapped it again, harder, as if additional pressure might shake loose some hidden sub-menu, a progress bar, a timeline, anything resembling useful information. The message sat there, serene and unhelpful. She set the phone down on the side table, picked it up again, read the message one more time as if the words might have rearranged themselves in the intervening 3 seconds. They had not. She put the phone down again, this time with deliberateness that was almost but not quite a slam. This reads a little neurotic to me. I might tone that down a little bit. $5,000. She'd paid $5,000, submitted to a background check that somehow surfaced her 7th grade disciplinary record, completed a personality assessment that had taken 4 hours, and included the question, if your attachment style were a weather system, what would it be? And sat through a video interview with a woman named Cleo, who had smiled warmly while asking questions that peeled back layers Tessa hadn't authorized anyone to touch. And the result, after all that, was 6 words and a font choice. Okay, that definitely no. This is borderline. I get where it's going with it, but I think I can write something that I think is funnier. I'm not sure. Peel back layers Tessa hadn't authorized anyone to touch. That's also, I'm not sure I like how that's phrased, even if I wouldn't argue with the point. Something stirred at the edge of her awareness. Not quite dread, not quite excitement, something in between that she didn't particularly want to examine. A low hum in her chest, like the vibration of a phone she couldn't silence. Again, some of these metaphors they make me cringe. I can do better. Your heart, but that's why we do this, because now it's like, okay, yeah, maybe I do want something in there, just not that specific one. But I've got an idea of where to go with that. Your heart rate just changed, Artemis said from the windowsill. She still hadn't opened her eyes. I can hear it from here. Tessa didn't look at her. No, it didn't. 68 beats per minute during the session, steady the whole time, even when the couch was on fire. 79 now, 80. You're not even moving. What are you looking at? Nothing. You're a terrible liar. It's one of your better qualities, actually. It makes my job easier. That actually is probably pretty good. But I would do something with this dialogue to make that line hit harder. Tessa crossed the room to the couch and flipped the scorched cushion over, pressing the edges down until it sat flat. The underside was clean. She'd flip it back before tomorrow's first appointment, or she'd order the slipcover tonight, or both. This whole paragraph does nothing for me. I might just pick up the thread here. Artemis stretched on the windowsill, a long, luxurious extension of black fur and sharp angles, and resettled her chin on her paws. Her eyes stayed closed, but her ears, those satellite dishes that missed nothing, rotated a fraction of a degree in Tessa's direction. 82, she said. I'm straightening a cushion. It's physical exertion. You're straightening a cushion. You've already straightened. It's not exertion. That's avoidance. All right. This whole bit here, too, might get condensed down. Tessa smoothed the cushion one final time, stood up, and tugged the hem of her cardigan straight. The office was clean. The session notes could wait until the morning. The ember tray needed emptying, but that could wait too. Everything was fine. Everything was exactly where it needed to be. I think we're almost at the end here. On the side table, her phone screen had gone dark. Somewhere inside it, in whatever enchanted server farm powered Cupid's infrastructure, an algorithm or a spell or some unholy hybrid of both was processing her data, cross-referencing her vulnerabilities, and selecting a human being it had decided she should love. Her patience, apparently, was appreciated. She turned off the desk lamp, grabbed her bag, and headed for the door. Artemis floated off the windowsill and landed silently on the floor, falling into step beside her with the easy precision of a creature who had been walking this particular path for years. Nope, we're just going to end that sentence at falling into step beside her. For the record, Artemis said as I stepped onto the hallway, it was 84 by the time he put the phone down. Again, we're still harping on this. Tessa locked the office door and did not dignify that with a response. So that's the AI's cut at chapter 1. Now let's zoom this out so that we have a little bit bigger of a view here. If I go full screen. So as we can see here, going from the top, here's some, you can see how much I black inked. A sentence here, a word there, a few paragraphs here. So most of this I thought was all right, but there's chunks where to me it reads like AI-isms or I feel I could do better. So we have a solid start there. And if I had a classroom full of people here, I would ask folks, what is it that you think is missing here? What is this chapter lacking? And now here at the end, because with the amount, we don't have enough time to fully read chapter 2, but we can probably start on it. Here's what I would do at this point to leave myself some editorial notes. So these will be cut from the chapter, but I'm leaving myself a note. I could also use the notes feature here. Actually, let's use the notes feature here. So this doesn't show up in the text, but it's something that I can refer to later. I'm just going to put a little bit of gibberish in there for a second. So in the notes feature, click that and you can pull up at a glance any notes that you have left for yourself. Clicking the microphone allows you to dictate notes, and the AI will then transcribe your words into text to have a written note here. And notes can be sorted by when they were created. They can be sorted by alphabetically by title or alphabetically by description. We don't need that at the moment with just one note. But what I would say reviewing chapter 1 is it lacks inner monologue. This is from Tessa's POV, but we see very little of what she actually thinks of things. And that is that seems to be a pretty common AI struggle, is interiority. It'll explain a scene, it'll describe things, it can describe what characters, the actions they take, but it doesn't do the job I would want it to about getting into a character's head. And so that's one of the things that I think you really need to lean on yourself, is getting into the character's thought process and articulating that for readers. So that is one thing I would note for myself as a revision note. 2, check descriptions. Can those be made a bit more lively? 3, the chapter never said Artemis is a cat. I didn't spell that right. Nor is their relationship, I can't talk and type, ever clarified. So I would probably add a little something in there to explain Artemis and what their relationship is. That doesn't need to be exhaustive. It could be a line or two, but I think there should be something in there. For getting in Tessa's head, why does Tessa care about dating enough to sign up for this app? Because if we see her obsessively checking, looking for a match, blah, 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 we don't have context as written yet for right now for why she's looking at that. We don't have context for why she cares. So these at the moment, just in an initial read through, those would be my 4 notes for myself on what I want to do with this chapter to take that first pass and make it better. So we're not going to get all the way through chapter 2, but let's start on that and just get a little bit of a taste on where they're going with it here. So chapter 2, the bar was called Glimmer, which Eddie thought was a stupid name for a place that looked like the inside of a copper pipe. So now we have here, it is actually giving us a little bit of interiority because that's his thought. Ward light ran along the ceiling in lazy amber veins, pulsing faintly whenever someone at the far end got too loud, the enchantment dampening noise before it could bleed into neighboring conversations. It was the kind of place that charged $14 for a cocktail and then kept it at the exact right temperature until you finished it, which Eddie had to admit was worth at least 6 of those dollars. I don't mind that one. Normally I grumble when AI writes price notes. I would keep this, but I think I can take that sentence and elevate it even more. Dev was already at their usual booth, 2 empty glasses, sweating rings onto the table, and a third halfway gone. He spotted Eddie before Eddie spotted him, which meant he was already waving with both arms like a man flagging down a rescue helicopter. There he is, the ghost whisperer, the specter inspector, please stop, the phantom therapist. I'm a regret consultant. Eddie dropped into the booth and shrugged off his jacket. Something clinked in the inner pocket, a small brass compass he used for ectoplasmic readings, which he'd forgotten to leave at home. I might just straight cut that or come up with another detail. And you've had too much to drink. I've had exactly the right amount to drink. Dev pushed a menu across the table. I ordered you the smoked old-fashioned, the one with the little fog cloud. I don't want the one with the little fog cloud. Too late, it's coming. This is a kind of how AI writes banter too. Again, we're saying the thing, now we're saying the same thing again. Kind of like what we saw in the last chapter. Eddie leaned back and let the ward light settle around them. See, ward light just sounds like gibberish, fantasy gibberish to me. I don't have a clear picture of what that means, so I would probably phrase that as something else. The enchantment was doing its thing. The couple arguing 3 booths over had been reduced to a pleasant murmur, and the bass from the live music upstairs registered as a gentle vibration in the table rather than a headache. Dev looked good, annoyingly good. 6 months ago, the guy had been subsisting on microwave burritos and doom-scrolling apartment listings after his lease fell through. Now he was wearing a shirt with actual buttons. His beard was trimmed into something intentional, and he had the specific glow of a person who was getting regular sleep and consistent affection. So I think that should be its own paragraph. It should start there. And I'm going to flag this. I think conceptually it's right, because it's trying to articulate the benefits of the Cupid app and why somebody would want it. And Dev is our advertisement here, pushing Eddie to sign up for the app to get him moving along the story. So I like what this paragraph is trying to accomplish, but I might twist some of the details, make him, he just sounds like he's at rock bottom. I don't know that I want him to be at rock bottom, but I do want there to be some progression from, the app making his life better. Eddie knew that glow. He saw it in the living relatives of his clients, the ones who'd gotten closure in time. He never quite managed to generate it himself. The living relatives of his clients, the ones who'd gotten closure in time. That one's not quite clicking with me right away, so I'm going to highlight that sentence. So, Dev said, leaning forward with the posture of a man about to deliver a pitch, I want to talk to you about something. No, you don't even know what it is. You've got the face you had when you tried to get me into CrossFit, and the face you had when you tried to get me to invest in that enchanted meal prep service. Fresh Hex was ahead of its time. It gave people hives, Devs. Minor hives. And this is different. Dev planted both palms on the table. This is about Cupid. And he picked up the menu even though he already knew what he was ordering. Pass. You haven't heard. I've heard plenty. Magical dating app, Aphrodite's pet project, matches people with what? A 90-something% success rate? 93% of matches result in long-term partnerships or marriage. Dead said it the way people quoted scripture. Eddie, 93%. Great. Good for them. Good for me. Dev sat back and spread his hands, presenting himself as evidence. 6 months. 6 months, and I'm happier than I've been in, I don't even know, years. Kai is, he stopped and something genuine moved across his face, something that wasn't performance or salesmanship. Kai is the best person I've ever met, and I never would have found them without the app. So here, I never specified who he found, so I'm noting that the partner's named Kai, and they appear non-binary, and for now, all I'm going to do is note that I noticed that and decide if I want to make any changes there or not. The server arrived with Eddie's old-fashioned. A tiny cloud of aromatic smoke hovered over the glass, curling in on itself like a lazy ghost. Eddie watched it dissipate. I'm happy for you, he said, and he meant it. That doesn't mean it's for me. It's exactly for you. It's the most for you person I know. What does that even mean? It means you're 31, you're Signal, and you spend 60 hours a week helping dead people process their feelings. And the last date you went on one was March? February. 4 months ago. And how did that end? So this is one thing I'm going to note here. There's already a Kai in the story, was there? That's the other thing, is when I'm reading through things. Characters Tessa, Edgar, Artemis, Cupid, Aphrodite, Edgar. I'll keep an eye on it. Anyway, so where was I getting at? So one thing, I completely lost my spot. Good for me. Okay. This is what I was going to highlight. I call this soap opera dialogue a little bit. It means you're 31, you're Signal, you spend 60 hours a week helping dead people process their feelings. So this is one character telling another character details that they are already going to know, um, which you see a lot in soap operas, because in soap operas they don't always have people tuning in, every day for every episode. So they have to put those things in there for the benefit of the audience, to remind the audience of what's going on. But the characters themselves would never need that reminder, because it's deep knowledge that everyone knows. So this is too on the nose for dialogue. I would find another way to articulate to readers within this chapter that Eddie is 31 and single, rather than putting it in dialogue. Some of this banter is actually pretty decent, but some of it is a little bit repetitive too. So we take a look at things there. Oh, not your wiki, in chapter 1. Oh, yeah, you're right. This is the other thing you have to remember. Yep, your memory is better than mine. Very well done. Marin loving Kai doesn't choose up she has for you. So yeah, we have two Kais in a row. It now it The reason I think it did that here is that it looked to the past chapter for context, and it saw that there was a Kai, so it brought that back in. So now we 100% have to not the this caps lock, this 100% cannot be Kai. We need a different name there. Good call out. And so we've got, I'm skimming ahead here. I'm not actually going to read, but okay, so we've got dialogue. We've got, I see Dev making the pitch, $5,000. We're still bantering about it. You're credible at your job, blah, blah, blah. It looks like now we're talking about the screening process. I'm just trying to skim the flow. We'll look at this more on the next stream. Okay, now this is the part where he gets into describing the scene that I decided not to generate, that I thought could be called. So that wouldn't want to be in there. Okay, so this part is, I think, getting a little bit into Eddie's head about where things go. We're concluding the pitch. And again, here's an example of that dialogue repetition. We're not celebrating. We're pre-celebrating. It's a thing. It's not a thing. That feels too much like Marvel Cinematic Universe dialogue, and I would pretty much 100% cut that. To Cupid, to 93%. Again, some repetition on the point. We could phrase that another way. And the chapter ends. So I would go through, we'll go through and we can read that more on another stream, and probably start going through and trying to do the actual work of taking the things that I have flagged and altering them to be punched up in higher quality. So as you can see, this is kind of going to be a longer series. I want to really show the entire beginning to end process of doing a thing, and that it's not just, snap your fingers, have a book done, if you care about the quality of the finished result. And so I could show, here's how I approach these sorts of things. So this was a good start. I enjoyed what I've read so far. I see pretty clearly the spots for me to sink my teeth into this manuscript and put my stamp on what I want with it. So I think that's what we'll do next time. Again, I mentioned it at the beginning. I'll say again, there will not be a stream next week, because next Friday I am in Atlanta, Georgia. So I will be out of town, and I will be talking about what I am doing in Atlanta, Georgia. Upon my return, which will be Tuesday the 21st. And, on the newsletter that Thursday the 23rd and the stream on Friday the 24th. I'll include that in some of the stuff we're talking about. But anyway, appreciate you hanging out with me today, and I hope everyone